Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to do a quick walkthrough of our InClass Lab 5. This is called the guessing game, and I have the program up here on my screen here. We're going to read the instructions. We want to create the logic for a program. We want the program to generate a random number between 1 and 100. We want it to take an input of a number from the user between 1 and 100. We want to validate that input to make sure that the user typed in a number that was between 1 and 100. We're going to do that with a pretest loop. If the range is incorrect, in other words, if they type in something less than 1 or more than 100, we're going to keep looping until they do type in a valid number. Valid numbers are 0 in any integer between invalid numbers are 0 in any integer or any number greater than 100. When the correct number is guessed, we want our output to show the correct number and the number of attempts that it took the user to guess it. Now we will use a counting loop to keep track of how many guesses the user makes. The program uses a loop that will continue until the correct number is guessed or until the user enters a negative integer to quit. We're going to ask the user when they get ready to quit to just type in a negative number, any negative number. Before ending, the program will display a thank you screen. Now, when the user is guessing, if the number they type in is lower or higher than the generated number, then we want the program to display the appropriate message. Either your guess is too high or your guess is too low. And we want it to accept another input and continue on with the game until the user enters the correct number. After the user enters the correct number, we want to, as I said, we want to have an output that lists the correct number, how many guesses it took them, and we want to thank them for playing the game. These are, if you look at the instructions, you'll see some sample input-output screens that I have put up here for you. This is kind of what we want it to look like. And when we do input, we want to make sure that we use a prompt, a user prompt, so that the user knows exactly what they're supposed to type in. And these are, again, just some sample screens. Now we're going to jump, and I've also given you the pseudocode. I'm going to minimize this and get to the pseudocode. This is the pseudocode for our program. It's a very short, simple program. We're going to walk through it with you. Let's see if I can put this on half of my screen. And I've also got Visual Logic already running, so we're going to put it here on the other half of the screen so that hopefully you can see both of these screens at the same time. And I'll have to zoom in and out as I type this. Okay, if we look at our pseudocode, the first thing we have to do with any program, you'll notice here, we have to declare and initialize all of our variables. The first thing we want the computer to do is to pick a random number, and we're going to use a function. It's an intrinsic function built into Visual Logic. It's built into just about any programming language out there that will automatically generate a random number. So this is going to be an assignment. And I'm going to name it, as I did on the pseudocode, I'm just going to name it rand number. That stands for random number. Then I'm going to type the intrinsic function here that's built into Visual Logic. It's a function called random. And then in parentheses, you want to put how many numbers you want it to choose from. In our case, we want it to pick from 1 through 100, so I'm going to type 100 in parentheses. And since if I left it like this, it would actually pick a number between 0 and 100. Well, we don't want it to pick 0. We want between 1 and 100. That's why I'm going to type +1. If I type +1, it will start with the number 1. And it will pick a number between 1 and 100, including 1 and 100. So that's our first variable. Our next one is the guess. We need to know we need a variable to hold the number that the user types in, their guess. And I just call this variable guess, just to keep it simple. And I'm going to initialize it to 0 because the user hasn't guessed anything yet. Then our third and final variable is we need to keep track of the number of attempts that the user makes, because we want to display the number of guesses, how many tries it took them. So I'm going to call this attempts. And this time I'm going to go ahead and initialize it to 1 rather than 0. Because if you look at our pseudocode, this next line of code will be asking them to input a number. I want to make sure it counts that, so I'm going to go ahead and start the count with 1 so that this isn't counted. If I put 0, it wouldn't count this first one, and my guess would always be 1 less than what it really is. So I'm going to go ahead and initialize this first attempt, the attempt to 1. That way it will count this first one here. Okay, now we've got our variables. We're ready for our input. And we are going to ask the user, well, to start with, we're asking them to input their guess. So that's the variable name they're inputting. And we're going to have a prompt. I've actually put the prompt here in the pseudocode. We're going to say, enter a number between 1 and 100. And then in parentheses, I'm going to say, enter a negative number to quit. Close my parentheses and close my quotes. You know, text always has to be in quotes. So that's what the user will see there. Now, if you look at your pseudocode, our next thing is a while loop. This is where we're validating the guess that they inputted. We've got to validate it and make sure it is between 1 and 100. So we're going to use a while loop here. And the condition we're testing is we want to make sure, we want to find out if the guess, and this is going to be excuse me. We want to make sure the guess, or we want to ask if the guess is equal to 0, or is the guess greater than 100? Because if it is, if they guess 0, if what they type in is 0 or anything greater than 100, then we want them to type in a different number. Now I put equals 0 there because if they type in a negative number, which is less than 0, then we just want the program to exit because that's what they mean. So we will deal with that in just a second. But let's make sure they type in the correct number first. Now again, if the guess is equal to 0 or is greater than 100, then here's what we want it to do. If you look at your pseudocode, we basically want them to input another number. So what I'm going to do, rather than type all that again, I'm going to go up here to this input because it's the exact same input. I'm just going to right click on it and click copy. And then I'm going to click here on the true side and click paste because it's the exact same input. I'll double click on it and you can see that it's the exact same. It just saved me from having to type that again. So if this is true, it's going to ask them to input another number and it's going to check it again. If it's false, then we go to our next line of code, which we need to find out whether they type in a negative number or not. So what we need to do here is another while statement. We want this program to continue to run while the guess is greater than or equal to 1. So that would be our condition. That means if they type in anything less than 1, it's going to end, or a negative number. If they type in a 0, we've already dealt with that in this previous step. If they type in something less than, or if the guess is, as long as the guess is greater than or equal to 1, we want the program to run. If this is false, then we want it to go down and thank them for playing the game and exit, which we'll deal with that in a moment. We're always going to deal with the true part first. So if you look at our next line of code here, notice how this is indented under while. That means that's the true part. So we have an if statement here. We have to determine whether their guess is equal to this random number or not. Or actually what we're going to ask is if their guess is greater than the random number. So right here in the true part, true branch, we're going to put an if condition. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see a little more of my code here. And if you look at your pseudocode, it'll tell you exactly what your condition is. This is what we're asking. If the guess is greater than the random number. And make sure you type the variables exactly, spell them exactly like you declared them up here. If the guess is greater than the random number, then of course we want to display a message saying your guess is too high. So in the true part, we are going to put an output, and we want that output to say your guess is too high. We'll put a few blank spaces there to space it over. And we also want to add one to the attempt. You notice how this is indented exactly under one another. That means they come right under one another. So we're going to increase the attempts by 1. Attempts equal attempts plus 1. Now, that brings us to the else part of this if statement. The else part is the false branch. So if you look right under that, there's another if statement. So that, and it's indented under the else. That means it's in the else branch or in the false branch. So we're going to put another if statement here. And this time we've just asked, is the guess greater than the random number? Now we want to ask, is the guess less than the random number? Because if it is, we want to display a message saying your guess is too low, which is the next line of code. Which would just be another output. And again, we still want to increase the attempts. So if you look, it's not indented under output. It's exactly in line with that output, so it's directly under it. So right here, that would be attempts equal attempts plus 1. Because no matter whether this is true or false, we still want to increase the intent. Right? And then this brings us to the else part of this little if statement. The else part, as I said, is the false branch. So if the guess is greater, if the guess is not greater than the random number, if this is false, it's going to come down here and it's going to say, okay, is the guess less than the random answer? And if that's false, if it's not less than the random number and it's not greater than the random number, then obviously it's equal to the random number. That's the only thing you have left. So if this is false, we want to display the message, correct. The number is, and whatever the number is, and it took you however many attempts it took you. So we need an output. Scroll over here. Trying to resize all this so you can see as much as possible on my screen here. We use the conjugation symbol, the at sign, the and symbol. And anytime I do an output, I always put an and I put about 4 blank spaces there just to space things over a little bit. And then with this output, I can just hit the enter key to drop to the next line, because I also want it to say on the next line, it took you and the number of attempts and space TRIES. If you'll notice, I put a space right there in front of tries That way there'll be a space between the attempt number and the word tries. If I didn't put that space there, the number and the word would be right up next to one another. I want a space between them. That's why I put that space there. And that's what we need to do. But we also want this program, even if they win the game like that, we also want it to continue to play. We want the computer to pick a new random number and ask them to guess it. We want the program to continue to run until they type a negative number to quit playing. So if you look under this output here, you'll notice we have this directly in line with that output, which means it's right there. We're telling the computer to pick a new random number. So, and this is the exact same thing we did up top when we declared this variable to begin with. We're just telling it to pick a new random number, is all that's doing. And we're also going to reset the attempts back to 1. Put the attempts back to 1. And that ends this if statement, which brings us down to right here. And this also ends that main statement, which is that right there. Right after that last end if, in other words, right here on this line, what we need to do is ask them to input another guess. And again, the inputs are the exact same, so I'm just going to go up here and copy this one because they're all the same. Right here at the end, I'm going to paste one right there. And I also need to validate that again and make sure it's the right number. So what I need to do is I'm just going to copy this while statement right here, because we need to put that exact same statement down here at the bottom, just like this. It'll input the guess. If they type a number between 1 and 100, then it's going to loop all the way back around and see if it was a negative number or not. Now the last thing we need to do, once they do type a negative number and it enters this fault statement, we need to have some output saying thank you for playing the guessing game. So over here we need an output. Thank you for playing the guessing game. Now I'm going to minimize this. And that's what our program should look like. I'm going to try to zoom out a little bit. Hopefully you can see the whole thing, or most of it anyway. That's what your program should basically look like. Now I'm going to run it just to make sure it works. When I run this, it should ask me to enter a number. And just to check, I'm going to enter a 0. It should ask me to enter a new number. And it does. I'm going to enter 120 just to see. It should ask me the same thing. And it does. Okay, I'm just going to pick 50. Alright, it tells me the guess is too high. So I'm going to go for 40. Guess is still too high. Go for 20. Guess is too low. So I'm going to type 30. Guess is still too low. So let's type 35. Guess is too high. Let's try 33. Guess is too high. Let's try 32. That is it. And that should be your output. Correct. The number is 32. And it took you 7 tries. I had to guess 7 times before I got that number right. If I click OK, it should ask me to pick another number altogether. And it does. So I'm going to enter just any negative number. I'm going to enter negative 50. It should thank me for playing and quit. And it does. And that's all there is to this program. This is InClass Project 5. I will be doing an InClass Project 6 hopefully tomorrow morning, and we'll get it posted tomorrow morning. Hopefully. And as always, if you have any questions or you're having any problems at all, please, please, please do not hesitate to contact me through Blackboard. I'm always here to try and help as well as I can. And I will see you guys next time.